Welcome in. Look at
When
there,
did we get
Don.
that? When did we
Greg
get that
Barnes.
intro?
We got it. John Bowman and Michelle Hillison knocked that video out, and it's my intro music for some reason,
Oh,
but it's pretty cool. It's pretty
it is
cool.
cool.
Welcome,
That's the first time I saw it. And then look,
welcome to the.
after the
Hold
intro,
on. Let me introduce the show before you go, Greg. Before you came in here, Don was fixing his hair, but let me do this officially. Hold on, we got a lot of people in here. Welcome to the Inside Carolina Signing Day special, calling it Signing Day Dish. Since we're starting at 1 o'clock. Like I said on the message boards, it's noon somewhere. It is 1 o'clock here on the East Coast. That's Don Callahan. That's Greg Barnes. I'm Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Now, Don, load it up. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, we get this great intro that I've never seen before. And then boom pops Greg Barnes.
He just
Greg
like
was not there
appeared.
before. Now he's here.
Well, Sean Crawley believes that we all need to sign lifetime contracts with Inside Carolina. I think we pretty much have. It's all I know. And I know if you cross El Jefe, you sleep with the fishes. But Don, today, February 5th, not a big day for North Carolina recruiting the last few years, obviously.
Yeah.
The former staff like to have everything done in December. If there was a straggler in February, maybe it was somebody that we covered, but a little bit different this time. You've been quite busy over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I think really it's for all staffs, unless you're going through a coaching transition. The true National Signing Day, which is today, the first Wednesday in February, is always kind of boring, and most staffs aren't adding players to their recruiting class unless they went through a coaching transition, and obviously that's what we did. The last time North Carolina had a lot of, I guess, movement or activity on National Signing Day was when Mac Brown was first hired. So the past month has been absolutely nuts for me because there's a lot of like what I believe is watching video. We like this guy, offer this guy, get this guy committed sort of situations with North Carolina. Speaking of which, before we go any further, we probably should mention that one of the remaining targets, Madrid Tucker, a wide receiver or athlete out of Fort Myers, Florida, he is going to be announcing his decision at 2 p.m. from his high school auditorium, choosing between North Carolina and West Virginia. And we have, I think, decided that we'll stay on air for that. And
Yeah.
I don't know, do we have a way of I can watch it on my phone. Do a way
I
of
might be able to put it on the screen if you'll send me the link, a good link to that, and I might be able to throw it up on the screen. I guess we can do that. I don't guess it's copyrighted.
Yeah,
we'll figure out the details.
No, it would be from his Instagram, so that wouldn't be copyrighted. But so one of the cool things we'll do is if he picks North Carolina, I don't know how, but I kind of show just the process that we do as far as sending out text, sending out the Twitter, and I have to kind of, I don't know if I grab my laptop or not, but kind of lock it all in just in case he picks North Carolina. But Greg has not said a word yet. So Greg, how are you doing?
I'm just watching you do your magical work, Don, of trying to keep up with all this. This has been chaotic. I think everybody that has followed IC and your work for the past 20 years understands that signing day is such a crazy time. And granted, since the early signing period came into effect, I mean, what is that, 7 years ago now? Mm-hmm. 8 years ago? That changed it quite a bit because the first Wednesday in February used to always be so chaotic, and it kind of split after that. But now with Bill Belichick in place and whatever it is that has transpired in terms of their scouting process, and I know that the sourcing aspect of things is a work in progress, and just seeing some of the players that he's grabbed both from the portal and from the high school ranks, you kind of say, okay, what's he thinking? What's his prototype? What kind of roles is he trying to fill? And so while fans and media are just trying to kind of wrap our heads around it, you're actually in the weeds trying to figure all this out yourself to explain it to us. And As always, Don, I'm just in awe, and this has just been fantastic and excruciating. I don't know if that's the right word to watch. As a media member and as the fans kind of try to put their hands around all this. It's very entertaining, to say the least.
So
Well, let me say this,
can
Don,
I
before
give
you
a
jump
quick
in.
example because it's kind of breaking news?
Okay, go ahead. Good gracious.
So Kamarion Thomas earlier told me he had not signed. And let me see if I can get this here. He just messaged me, signed. So I just changed in the, what we were calling this, we had a couple of names for it. The National Signing Day Central changed him from committed to signed. So that's kind of the behind the scenes sort of situation that we're dealing with here. So Kamarion Thomas has now signed with North Carolina as per he DM'd me. So
let me read his bio a little bit. Brooklyn, New York edge from Erasmus High, unranked DL, but here's his quote. Can I read that since it's not a premium article anymore?
go ahead.
I guess.
Go ahead.
I was talking to the GOAT, said the 6'3", 280-pound Thomas. He coached Tom Brady, so I was like, damn, I'm really talking to him now. He told me some good news I wanted to hear. He told me I had an offer. It's amazing. I was amazed he did that. My reaction was screaming quietly. I was like, this is dope. So now he's texted, DM'd, however he got into Don's private messages.
Yeah, so we've been messaging. Brian Doan actually did the story just because he has been covering that school for a long time and had a relationship with the high school coaches and all of that. But I've been dealing with him, and he's been. I'm talking about Kamarion Thomas, and he's been awesome to deal with. So I'm almost kind of jealous that Brian got to do the interview with him because it seemed like he was a fun kid to do to get some. I mean, obviously that's a tremendous quote to get from him. But to go back to what kind of Greg was saying is it's just been nuts because a lot of the kids, and it's kind of dawned on me just recently, really, like I'm talking about this morning, like a lot of the kids, because some of them didn't get a whole lot of coverage and they almost don't know how to deal with media. For example, the Jalen Nichols, running back from Louisiana kid, he told me on Monday he was going to sign with North Carolina. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, how are you going to announce it? What's the plan here? I didn't want to I've never been one to kind of run on Twitter and be like, this kid told me this, want to do an interview, that sort of thing. And then the kid went completely radio silent on me. And I'm like, what's going on? So I was trying to get back up with them. And then next thing I know, there's a graphic out there on social media on Tuesday, right before I'm about to go to coach a basketball game that he had that he was planning on signing. So that's kind of what I've been dealing with a lot of kids where it's kind of weird this late in the process to explain, hey, look, we're doing an interview and we're doing this and that sort of thing. And has been a little bit different because some of these kids just haven't been recruited at a high level and haven't had to deal with media a whole lot.
I don't know if you can answer this without doing a little bit of research, but we talked a lot about in the past, and Greg remembers these conversations. Guys don't commit, or they don't usually. Let's say there's been some interesting stories about guys committing without officially visiting, sight unseen, and all that. How many of these guys that we're seeing sign, done, committing, and signing today have visited North Carolina?
Most of them have. The only Thomas that we just got done talking about, Kamarion Thomas, he did not. He was offered on Sunday. And then I feel like Jalen Nichols has never visited. And he was offered on Monday, I believe. And then also the kid who flipped from Navy, Trey Giddens, he was offered on Sunday and he has not visited North Carolina. And so these are just rare situations. And really, to be honest, North Carolina in a lot of those were competing against no one else or competing against ECU or Navy. So it's a little bit hard. It's a little bit easier to be like, hey, take this ticket to a step of higher football, and a kid just kind of jumping on it. Whereas I think, North Carolina, like there is one kid that maybe North Carolina can kind of go against the grain on this. What I'm talking about, I don't have him on my list right now. I don't even know how to pronounce his name, to be honest. The kid from Canada who basically was on track to sign with Michigan State today. and North Carolina offered him also on Sunday. Initially said thanks, but no thanks, but then got to thinking about it, and he was like, well, maybe I should think this through a little bit, and now is waiting until Monday to sign his ASA. And so he's another example of a kid who has not visited campus yet. But these are extremely rare situations. Prior to this class, there have only been 2 kids since I've been covering North Carolina who did not officially visit North Carolina at some point and sign with North Carolina. And one was Chaz Surratt, and the only reason why that happened was he had an official visit scheduled for January. He initially planned on staying at East Lincoln High School throughout because he wanted to play basketball with his brother. East Lincoln was great basketball team that I can't remember. They went to the state championship. I can't remember if they won any of them or not. But anyway, wanted to play again with his brother, and but he had hurt his throwing arm, and so wasn't going to be able to play basketball, and so he decided at the last minute to enroll early at North Carolina and just rehab in Chapel Hill. And the other was Delvon Simmons, who visited North Carolina early on. This was back when John Blake was in Chapel Hill. Took 5 official visits elsewhere. Went the whole distance with his recruitment and came on to signing day and was like, I don't like these 5 schools. I really like my visit in North Carolina, and then signed with North Carolina. And then eventually he asked for and received his release from his letter of intent, which back in those days didn't happen very often. Those are the only 2 examples prior to this year.
George Jenkins put in the chat, Tom McGinnis, the punter, the Aussie punter. But
yeah,
I mean, those are also different.
I mean, you have to understand those situations. Those are a school reaches out to, I think it's called Pro Kicker or something like that in Australia, and they say, hey, we need a punter, or we need a kick, or I think they just have punters. We need a punter, and they kind of, I don't know what they do. Maybe use a slot machine or something, or flip a coin or whatever, and they're like, all right, we're going to send you this guy. So I mean, that's a little bit of a rare situation. And the same thing happened with the Greg should know that the prior punter from Australia before McGinnis, Sheldon, yes, that Fedora would talk about his visions of him in Australia smoking a cigarette and all those sort of things.
Your audio stinks, by the way, today.
Does it really?
Just telling you. It sounds like we're on a cell phone and you're going in and out. I don't know if it may just be me. It may be my cheap AirPods.
Let me see.
These are AirPods, but they're not really AirPods. You know what I mean? That's knockoffs. Greg, covering Carolina football for a long time. Me longer than you, but you certainly deeper into it there for a right good while. This just seems like pure, you mentioned it earlier, pure chaos. And it sounds like pure chaos, and it looks like pure chaos, but there's a rhyme or reason, I would assume, in here somewhere. Your thoughts on getting this ship into port, I guess we can say, here on February the 5th. It seems like a lot of work for Belichick and crew.
Well, I think the reason it looks like chaos is because it's completely different than the status quo. And you mentioned that you've done this for so long. And I can remember back in, I guess it was 2007, Don had kind of divvied up responsibilities of who we were supposed to call to help him out. And I was responsible.
This is a long time ago.
At Durham Hillside. And I called that morning just to check on Greg Little to make sure that he was going to sign with Notre Dame. And his coach said, I'm not sure about that quite yet. And I was like, wait a minute, what? I thought this is just like an easy, like kind of check the box deal. But that's what we used to do. And it was a very streamlined process. There was some chaos involved with Chuck Amato singing to players and all kinds of stuff like that. But that was the fun of it. But in terms of the grand scope of things and the logistics, we knew what it was going to be. And that is out the window now. And that's why it seems so chaotic, is because Don's had his kind of method in place for a long time, and that's been disrupted. The fan base has known what to expect. They've known that, hey, if we get up at 7 a.m., we're going to see that steady stream of letters of intent coming in across the fax machine. And we know exactly what they're looking for. We know what type of player they want. All that stuff's out the window. And it's just fascinating to me. I know I've probably used that word too many times, but this is a new day for not just North Carolina football, but for college football in general. When you have somebody like Belichick come in and try to create this massive upheaval and saying, the way y'all have done it forever, I'm going to do something different. And I think once you can kind of embrace that, you know that on the back end, somewhere down the line, we'll know what that vision was. We just don't know what it is right now. So we're trying to take pieces from here and there and put them all together. And that's why it seems so just wild and crazy and all those things.
Indeed. And everybody in the chat, Don, said you sound wonderful. So it's on my end. But I understand. Buck Sanders is in the chat, and he, of course, is boss man. Buck, you can see Don dressed for the occasion. He'll put on a sport coat.
Tommy's wearing a hoodie.
What else would you wear to cover Bill Belichick? Just out of curiosity. But yeah,
I'm gonna 3 days gonna be in Philadelphia watching the Flyers take on the Penguins.
Okay, I'm sorry. I hope you survive the trip and get back down here.
And we're gonna go down to Philadelphia. We have a couple places in mind to watch the Eagles, the Super Bowl on Sunday.
I have a question for everybody in the chat, and there's 380 plus people in here right now. How many people in the chat have never been on campus at North Carolina? That's an interesting question. We're talking about never officially visiting and signing. How many people in the chat have never visited Chapel Hill, have never walked Carolina's campus? I'd be interested to know. Interesting case study. And Greg is muted.
Greg, you're muted.
Yes, sir.
I didn't want to interrupt you, Tommy. So it is an interesting case study, but I'll say this. This is a little bit off topic. One of the best parts about the IC message board community is that every so often a poster will post something saying, hey, I'm coming in for the game this weekend. I've never been to Chapel Hill. What are some things I need to look out for? And for us who live in the area, and I was fortunate to cover, 400 games. So I've been to Chapel Hill and to Smith Center so many times. It just, it is what it is, right? It's just another building that I've been to cover. And for so many people who are passionate diehards, whether it be the Smith Center or Keenan or wherever, it's kind of like this holy place, right? And just the fact that so many fans have not had the benefit of coming to Chapel Hill and experiencing that kind of gives you a unique perspective from our position when we've enjoyed those opportunities so much. And so I do think it's an interesting case study. I'm curious to what people say in the chat. But the fact that we see that so much on the boards, I think is really cool.
Yeah, look at that. Slee Rat said, first person to post and prove you've never been to Chapel Hill should win an IC game package. We could probably swing something like that.
Yeah.
We've done ticket giveaways to Keenan Stadium plenty of times. And but yeah, something we take for granted. And Don, when you cover these recruitments, Armando Baycott used to say on the basketball side, don't visit Carolina unless you plan on committing. Obviously, it's a little different on the football side, and it's not 100% accurate on basketball. But how important are official visits in your mind for people that are not? Chaz Surratt's been around the area forever, and all that. You've got guys from in-state, and I do want to get into the in-state recruiting too, by the way. But so don't let me forget. But how important is it for these guys to get on campus in an official capacity in the recruiting process? Have you seen?
I think it's more symbolic than anything else. And so I think because the reality is, and a lot of this can't come up because, and it's not like he even said he wasn't going to officially visit North Carolina. He just hasn't scheduled an official visit. And we're talking about Griffin Hayes, 26 recruit, who's already starting to schedule official visits for the summer. And the thinking is if you like a school, right? Why would you not visit there for free? You know what I mean? Like, think about any place that you like. Forget about sports. Your favorite place to eat, your favorite cousin to hang out with, whatever, family member, whatever. And someone were to say to you, you can go visit that place, all expenses paid. Why wouldn't you go? And so if you don't go, then unless there's some sort of special circumstances, then we're missing something here. You know what I mean? So, and that's what it comes down to. Now, again, like Chasserette, it just didn't work out. You know what I mean? The timing didn't work out for him. And with the punters from Australia, that just wasn't in the cards for those guys. And they're not making decisions. Those are 28-year-olds who are making business decisions, not guys who are, trying to see who, what's the best place to kind of hang out with and social atmosphere and all that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit different. But in recruiting, it's more symbolic when it comes down to it. I mean, there's a lot of recruits who say, yeah, I need these official visits to kind of separate it. I think really most recruits have a good idea of where they're leaning, or maybe they have one or two schools in their head. I don't think the official visits, I mean, I don't want to downplay that they don't help, but I think from a fan's perspective, it's symbolic when they take these official visits. And really in recruiting, because and Tommy, you always ask me these questions, and I always say it's a case-by-case basis, because really there's so many variables involved with each and every kid. And so we don't have a whole lot of like true tests to kind of lean on because we're all trying to predict where these kids are going, and we don't have tests to kind of lean on to help us predict where these kids are going. And the official visit test is one of the best, is the best test that we have right now. If a kid doesn't officially visit a school, he's not going there. I know that if the summer ends and a kid hasn't officially visited a school, I'm scratching off my list of guys that I need to keep tracking, because, the odds are just strongly against all the schools he hasn't officially visited.
Don, how is the official visits different under Belichick and what he's tried to do? Have you been able to get a sense of that?
Yeah, I have. And I want to be fair, because I don't know how much of this is just the current situation.
Yeah.
And because so right now, I guess the last month or so, recruits haven't had player hosts, which has been a commonplace. I've never heard players not having player hosts ever. So they haven't had player hosts, and they haven't had photo shoots, and which to us here, photo shoots are the dumbest things. Why are they necessary? But high school kids absolutely love them. And if you have high school kids and you kind of mention to them what a photo shoot is, and your high school kid probably is into Instagram and all that sort of stuff, they're probably like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I could see why one of my peers would be interested and would love photo shoots. So that's another aspect that's been taken away. The other thing is like, some of these official visits haven't been the full 48 hours, even though there's been plenty of time to accommodate that. For example, the 3 official visits this past weekend started on Friday, ended on Saturday. They could have been gone until Sunday. I don't know the answer on why they didn't. Maybe the staff just kind of squeezed in the itinerary so they can get everything knocked out in 2 days. But yeah, I mean, that's the other aspect of it. It's probably more of a business-like approach. And what's going to be interesting is if that stays. Now, I would assume they add the photo shoots. They don't have a graphics department right now. Some of those guys, to be honest, weren't part of the I guess mass firing. They just kind of left on their own. And so it's going to be interesting to see if that's kind of added back, and just what goes on in May and June when North Carolina goes back to hosting official visits.
So are we getting a text, or is this?
Yeah,
is this the baby monitor?
No, it's the text. I'm trying to see.
So can we?
It's a non. Let me mute this. It's a non-recruiting text message.
Okay,
I'm going to grab my laptop though. You guys talk amongst yourselves.
All right. While Don's gone, Greg, I'm gonna read this post on the message board from Fanatical Hill. Don clearly has been covering too much recruiting the last couple of months to do laundry. Must be down to the very bottom of his shirt drawer for that Flyers shirt. What people do not understand is this man is hardcore Philadelphia Flyers. Look behind him while he's not sitting there, the mascot. Greg, we sort of talked about this transition and all, and Don, hit on it you have a massive transition, whether it's in a football building or in a country or whatever. You're going to have a lot of chaotic things and a lot of people getting settled. It feels sort of like this situation here, and it's not a bad thing. Like, we just bought a new house, but we're going to have friends over, and we're not completely settled in. That's sort of what it feels like here with Belichick and his staff, and yet they are still getting people to come to the party without a problem loading up. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, and think about it from this perspective. We talked about the early signing period coming in, and Mac Brown talked about this when he was hired, of years ago, a decade ago and more, when you had a coaching change after the season, so early part of December, that coach could come in, and then they had basically 6 to 8 weeks to recruit and to kind of get settled before signing day. And what do we always talk about? Well, a coach got settled in at whatever school, they're really going to be able to recruit well in January because they've got 4 weekends of official visits, and they'll bring in all these kids and they can really get a good head start. Well, when the early signing period came in, that changed dramatically. And now you're having to make this immediate hire right after the end of the season, and you've got like 10 or 12 days before signing period. And now we've tacked on the transfer portal opening up. And that was a lot of the conversation with Belichick was, okay, it's Sunday night, right? The portal opens tomorrow. Are they going to get this done in time? And then you've got signing day coming up. And so you have that component, but then you also have the fact that Bill Belichick has never coached a game at the college level. So all those things with the portal being earlier, with signing day being earlier, combined with the fact that, yeah, he knows what it takes at the NFL level, no question about it. And he's probably going to figure it out at the college level, but he's just walking into it. So there's probably things that he wants to do. They're like, well, you can't do that at college. Like, it's fine in the pros, but you can't do that here. Or we just don't have the money to be able to do that specific thing. So that there's just so many moving parts, and you're exactly right. The party's already going on, and you're just opening up the house, and the people are trying to run into the house. So it's difficult, to say the least.
We're talking with Don Callahan, Greg Barnes on the Noon Dish, the 1 o'clock edition of Noon Dish, signing day dish, completing Carolina's 2020
1 o'clock
class.
Central Time.
Yeah, it's 12 o'clock somewhere.
Or 12 o'clock Central Time.
I can't wait until it's 5 o'clock somewhere. But 430 people currently in the chat with 28 minutes in, and we haven't really even talked about any recruits, Don.
Yeah.
Other than who you just talked about. Let's talk about Oturi and Newkirk.
Okay.
Were you surprised that the rankings went from where they were to where they are now?
Yeah.
We talked about the Saban bump, and we used to talk about the Carolina dip. Are we talking about the Belichick bump now?
Well, so from my understanding, one of the, I don't know if he's a member of the rankings committee or just a scout for 24/7 Sports or what the deal is, had fallen in love with this kid previously. And I think with Belichick taking him, kind of validated the position this person had and made it a whole lot easier for people to kind of listen to him when he wanted Newkirk to be, pushed up. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that high of a ranking, but I think that for what was left for Belichick to kind of scrap for after the early signing period, that Newkirk was absolutely, the best sort of option for him to add to this class, and definitely has some intriguing tools to kind of work with. But yeah, I was a little surprised that they bumped him up to a 4-star for a guy who's outside North Carolina. His best opportunities were I think D2 schools.
What do you like about him?
Well, I mean, good size, athletic, definitely has a live arm, might not be the most accurate arm, has a little bit of a weirdness to his delivery. He's lefty, and some coaches, for whatever reason, don't like lefty throwers. Don't confuse that with lefty punters that Belichick does like. And then also, I mean, well, I his production. I mean, he was undefeated as a starter the past 2 seasons, led Maury to 2 state championships, was I think offensive player of the year the past 2 seasons in the state of Virginia. Now, Maury's absolutely loaded, and it's a little bit of a Connor Harrell sort of situation where, you know, you're throwing to 4 or 5-star or 4-star guys. It wasn't to the level of Connor Harrell, but you're throwing to 4-star guys, have a bunch of, you know, college recruits surrounding you, and let me pull it up. It's going to take me a bit, but the scores that Maury put up was, I mean, laughable. Like it almost, you know, you wouldn't believe it's true. So let me just read these. So so you have 44 to 1, which I don't know what that is. I'm assuming that's a forfeit. 47 to 7, 62 nothing. Then they played a team, they beat them at 97 to 0, 82 to 0, 84 to 6.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
So how are we saying this team's loaded and a powerhouse?
This team is absolutely loaded. So, and here's the thing that, and Greg asked me what I like about him, and I'm also talking about what I don't like about him. My concerns, I guess, is that clearly offensive production is not only a result of your own ability, but also the ability of the people around you and who you're playing against. So you kind of have to take the offensive production with a bit of a grain of salt, but it's still enough to where somebody else, like I watch this film and I think, okay, that's clearly a kid who could go to a group of 5 school and be a really good group of 5 quarterback who eventually develops and is taken out of the portal by a power 4 school in a couple of years. So I think for what Belichick's trying to do and the limited options there are in the high school ranks after the early signing period, I mean, this is a home run, I think.
I mean, something that I wanted to ask you, and probably deeper in the show, but I'll go ahead and ask you now. What's there to lose by signing as many people, getting as many people out of the portal? I mean, we kind of joke about it, but it's like spring practice might be a tryout for all these guys because, quite frankly, they can. These guys won't be enrolled in spring, obviously.
Correct.
I would assume, but for the most part, it's going to be open tryouts, basically. I would think.
Well, here's the one thing, and I haven't been able to get like a full grasp on it, but I had a coach at a Power 4 program who I know called me last night and said to me, "Hey, isn't North Carolina getting close to 85 scholarships?" I was like, "Buddy, they're way over 85. They're pushing for that 105." And he's like, "What?" He's like, "Everybody else is we're staying underneath the 85." And I'm like, so I am curious on Greg's take on that. Just the fact that, I mean, Lombardi has come out and said that they're pushing for that 105.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this on the Next Level podcast that Tommy and I did earlier this week. But one thing that the Rams Club has done just an incredible job with is they've got $500 million in athletic scholarship money in the endowment. And that is such a massive amount of money that is earmarked for scholarships. And so when we start talking about the House settlement and how all this is going to play out, assuming it passes and is approved as we think it will be in April, UNC has made this commitment that not only are they going to be full rev share, meaning that if that number is 20.5 that they can share with student athletes, they're going to be at that total. And not all ACC schools are probably going to be at that total, even though all SEC and all Big Ten schools will be. In addition to that, North Carolina is making a significant commitment to funding these scholarships. And part of that is, of course, baseball is a big part of it. I mean, they're going from 11.7 to 35, which is just crazy. Basketball is going to go to 15. And then you've got a lot of these other sports that are getting a lot of scholarships. And football, because they committed to Belichick, they are going to set it up. We don't know if they're going to do exactly 105, but they're making a commitment to trying to fund these scholarships to the extent that they can. And he's exactly right that a lot of schools are not doing that. Ohio State is not doing that. But because you have that 105 cap, and especially in year number one, where Belichick's going to need to have a lot of different options to kind of see which kids actually can handle it, which kids can actually pop for them. I think that's a great benefit. I don't know if that's already been guaranteed to Belichick. We don't know that yet. However, I haven't heard anything to suggest that it's not on the table.
So I have a bunch of questions for you, Greg.
Okay.
I'm glad this came up. So first is, what if the House bill does not pass? It's already, there's been some, there was some ruling that the NCAA can't police NIL, which to me makes it feel like that NIL clearinghouse won't work, which is a big part of it. There's a bunch of other challenges to this bill. And then even if it passes, it's going to be challenged. And with that said, it seems like everybody else, as you kind of mentioned, and I think the SEC actually implemented, saying they're just going to stick with 85, at least for this coming season. Everybody else is like, hey, wait a second, we're just going to stick at 85 and wait to see what kind of happens. Is this wise? I mean, it just seems it seems like it would be put North Carolina in a really tough position if this doesn't pass and North Carolina has over 85 scholarships, right? Am I reading this wrong? Is there something I'm missing here?
So worst case scenario, let's say that it falls through and nothing transpires and they're stuck at 85 next year. I would hope that there's been some conversation in place of, if A happens, then we're going to do this. If B happens, we're going to do this. And whether that's gray shirts, whatever that may be. Hopefully at least some of those conversations are taking place. But in terms of the House settlement, there are already some serious issues that were raised last fall.
Mm-hmm.
And the Judge Wilkins, at that point in time said, all right, look, I'm not ready to pass this. You need to address these issues and come back. And so that happened. And they came back, got together, and she said, okay, I'm going to give you a preliminary approval. We're going to give everybody else some time to raise further complaints, which is what everything kind of popped, I guess, last week or the week before, because that was the end date where you can make complaints and raise concerns to set up for that hearing in April. One thing I want to point out is that the reason that NIL passed, when it passed, the way that it passed, with only 3 rules, and it was chaotic and it was the Wild West, is because the NCAA did not have a choice. Mm-hmm. And the reason they did not have a choice is because a number of state legislatures, Florida and a few others, had already made the decision that kids could benefit off their name, image, and likeness. And because those rules were set to take place on July 1st, 2021, the NCAA had no choice but to change course and allow that. That's one of the things I don't think is talked about enough, is that 2 weeks before NIL took place, the NCAA was still trying to prevent it from happening. And I say that because there's already been Illinois, Virginia, Ohio, and there's one other state. Slip in line. But there's been 4 states already who have put in motion plans to allow direct revenue sharing with student athletes. And so if the state legislatures make that a law, then the NCAA has a lot of issues in terms of what they can and cannot allow. And so even if the House settlement becomes a problem and it's delayed in April, I think the fact that some of these states are sitting on G, waiting on O, I think that's going to change a lot of this. And so there's a lot of belief kind of behind the scenes that while it may not be exactly what it's supposed to look like right now, that revenue sharing is coming, and that's going to set up all these other things into motion with the scholarships and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, I expect that the revenue sharing to happen. I just think, with the limits and all that, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a mess. The other thing too is the 105. Initially, I had people telling me the 105 means all 105 have to be on scholarship. Then some people more recently are telling me, no, some of those guys can be walk-ons. And then we do have evidence of 3 players who are being brought in at North Carolina as walk-ons. So that's another element that I'm a little bit confused on. Hopefully you can provide me some clarity.
So my understanding of that, and we haven't had a lot of discussion on this, is that really with the revenue sharing deal in terms of how the House settlement set up, the additional scholarship component is really to fall in line with the idea of if there's a roster spot available, then that roster spot can be deserving of a scholarship, but it is not required.
Okay.
And so if that limits at 105, like with what Ohio State and some of these other schools are doing and saying 90 or whatever that number is, you got additional room on the roster where kids can come in. And I assume that could be in a walk-on type position. The issue is going to be, and it's not going to be an issue this year, but the issue is going to be moving forward. Let's say Carolina says, all right, we're going to have 105 scholarships. Well, Ohio State says we're only going to have 90. But because we can have 105, we're going to take 15 walk-ons. Are we talking about, are there like legitimate 3-star guys who were being offered like a walk-on role at Bama or Ohio State or Georgia? And they say, well, I can just go to Carolina and get a free ride. And that's a drastic example, I know. But those are kind of the conversations. And so that's kind of like with rev share too, is if you go full rev share in 20 and a half, and let's say Boston College is not able to go full rev share and they're only at 17 million. Well, who does that benefit?
Yeah.
In theory, that benefits North Carolina, which is what the case would be with scholarships as well.
Let me throw this out. Say you have $20 million rev share and you have 85 players. Well, obviously 20 million divided by 85. I'm just using round numbers. Yep. Obviously, that's more per player than 20 divided by 105.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of moving parts there. A couple questions in the chat. Well, Greg, you got anything else to add there before I ask this question? Because I think these questions are going to be relevant.
Yeah, this has been great. I mean, selfishly, this has been great for me.
Yeah, no, Tommy, I think your point there is interesting. And one of the reasons, and I don't know if Don's gotten anything on this yet. I know Lombardi and Belichick have both talked about this. But they've said that kind of their vantage point coming from the NFL is that they're really going to be focused on player value. So it's not about spending, this quarterback's available if we pay him $3 million. There is a value attached to every single player that's available. And if a kid wants $3 million, but they've only got him valued at $1.5 million, well, they're just going to go to the next guy on the list. I don't know that a lot of the other schools think like that. I mean, I think it's, hey, we need a quarterback bad. We'll give him $5 million. It doesn't matter. That's the position that we need. Or we've got a gap here. We'll give him $2 million. I know everybody else in the running back room only makes $200,000, but hey, we need a kid and we're going to plug in the gap here, which can lead to potentially a lot of locker room dissent. And that's one of the things that various coaches have talked about. So Belichick's approach sounds like it's going to be completely different, which would be more in line with kind of what you're saying of like, okay, if everybody's even somewhat, then that could be a bigger issue.
From the conversations I've had, there are definitely some programs who've been following that. Typically, like when Saban was in Alabama, they did. Michigan State, before what's his name was fired, they were following that. But then you also had Miami, who was kind of just what the example Greg gave was like, oh, we need this position. Let's just throw a bunch of money at this guy. And that kind of ended up burning them. So, but I think there were some programs that were definitely kind of doing it the NFL sort of structure, kind of slotting certain money for certain positions and that sort of thing.
Let me ask a couple questions, and I'm not really sure if it's a Greg or Don question, but Tar Heel 14191 asks, what's more productive use of money, funding scholarships, the extra scholarships, or paying NIL to top players? I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about there. And then another question from DJ Senior asked, should we look at some of these guys as upgraded walk-ons? I guess the question is, Don, is how are they filling out? Who is filling out these 105s? Are they taking, and I guess we'll find out, are they taking guys that they expect to play or they want to see if they can play and be like depth or down the roster? You got to have a full roster anyway.
Yeah, so I think if we're being honest about these guys, and there are definitely some potential diamonds in the rough. We talked about Newkirk. Another guy I really like was a Tyler Hauser kid. And then the kid from California who originally signed with SMU. I'm forgetting how to pronounce his name now. He obviously was a 4-star. So that was a great sort of flip there in the middle of the month. He's actually already enrolled, so he's not a guy that we're covering today. But a lot of these guys are guys that North Carolina has flipped from Navy, East Carolina, Temple, or they weren't going to sign anywhere on Wednesday. So, yeah, I mean, they kind of fit the category of preferred walk-ons, maybe a step higher than preferred walk-ons, because you got to think that a kid probably would have, taken a scholarship at Navy or taken a scholarship even at Temple before he was going to walk on in North Carolina. So yeah, I think that we could look at these guys, especially if we were to kind of list out the roster based off of likely production. A lot of these guys will be towards the end of that, which would mirror basically last year, the year before, where the kind of walk-ons were kind of at.
Go ahead. Buck asked a question in the 20 and a half for all sports, not just football. Yes. I mean, it's going to be split up, but I was just using a round number because I do not do the math. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. So in terms of the question about scholarship money versus NIL, I think it's important that while everything is trending towards a pro sports model, there is still education in play. Mm-hmm. And that is a very important part of what UNC represents. That's what UNC wants to foster moving forward. And that has not changed. And so because of that, you really need to separate out the scholarship money versus the NIL and the rev share. Yes, it may come from some of the same pots in terms of donor funds. But as I said, Rams Club really targets scholarship funding for the endowment to really help student athletes, in the years to come, have the ability to come and not have to pay for tuition and room and board. One way to kind of look at it, with it being two separate pots, if you've got 20.5 for rev share next year, I mean, I don't know what the cost will be, maybe another 10. So you're talking about 30 million adding to the expense part of things on the ledger. So that's a lot of money. But when you separate it out and you say, okay, well, we've got rev share, and then you also have commercial NIL, which is with the clearinghouse deal that's supposed to be coming in. We can talk about that more if you want to. I think it's important that there's a lot of people kind of in the industry that while it's important to separate rev share versus collective or the commercial NIL, it's really a lot of the same money. The way that it's being raised and generated, and making sure you have corporate partners who can provide some of this NIL money and contracts to players. And that's where it comes in. And Buck asked about, or he made the comment of football is not getting that full 20.5. We know that Bill Belichick's supposed to get the 13 million. That's what's written into his contract and his term sheet. And then beyond that is what North Carolina is able to help raise with that commercial NIL, whether that's 6, 7, 8 million. That's all going to be dependent upon who they bring in and what fair market value for those types of contracts are in place. And that's one thing I think is important. People are like, oh, NIL is not going to be a big deal anymore. That's not true. Now, you may not have a backup left tackle getting $2 million like we've seen. Like, that's not going to hold up. But some of these top tier guys, they're going to be bringing in a lot of money still. Because, I mean, if you can say that we're going to bring in a kid who's a 5-star and we have all these opportunities to use him to really generate brand value for these companies, I mean, who's going to be able to challenge that successfully as an arbitrator? And I don't think that's going to happen very often. So I do think NIL will continue to be a big part of all this. But it's just a little bit different now that rev share is entering the mix as well.
Yeah, I absolutely think NIL is going to be a big part of it, because I think you're still going to have programs like Ole Miss who are going to try to buy a team. And what's going to be really interesting is the arbitration stuff that Greg's kind of mentioning, because I think, I think that's another thing that's going to be challenged in court, and it's not going to hold up but that's just me.
Let,
I just
let
think
me do
all
some
this stuff.
housekeeping.
What's that?
Go ahead. I was going to say, let me do some housekeeping, but
Go
I
ahead.
didn't mean to cut you. Let me talk about Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Don Callahan needs to do these reads, but Johnny T-Shirt on East Franklin Street or JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Deliver it straight to your house. Go there. Go to the website. Go in person. Tell them Inside Carolina sent you. Give them the code that you get from the Carolina or the Inside Carolina premium boards, whether it's Tar Pit Premium or UNC Basketball Premium, and you get 10% off your order. All the swag you need, all the Carolina swag, even the hoodies. Even though Don criticized me wearing a hoodie, hoodies season right now. It's like 45 degrees outside after being 80 yesterday. You need the hoodies. You need Johnny T-Shirt. Also, Congruity. Email Matt at congruityhr.com for your small to mid-sized business assessment. We're talking money. What better way to talk small business money than Matt at congruityhr.com? Don, you sent me the link to Madrid Tucker's Instagram. I don't know. It says I have to log in.
Oh, yeah, you might have to log in. I mean, if you
But I don't
can't
know
do it,
my
then I can just
login.
pull up on my phone.
Yeah, I do see he's got on his Instagram, he's got a fair amount of Carolina stuff, a fair amount of West Virginia stuff. But yeah, if you can get it up there and show people. So I guess, Don, with signing day today, let me ask this question. Carolina has added a lot, and you know the numbers, and the numbers potentially keeps going up. How many can Carolina hold? Can Carolina keep adding? I mean, just because signing day is today doesn't mean it's over in the 25 class.
That depends on if they're truly trying to push towards the 105, which is what we're kind of expecting, by my count. And I don't know if this is how far this is updated based off of what has happened today. By my count, North Carolina's at 94 scholarship players. So hypothetically, if they want to get to 105, that's what, 11 more that they could potentially add. Now, obviously, you would, even if you were wanting to get to 105, I would think you would want to keep a couple of spots or more than a couple of spots for this spring transfer portal. And I want to remind people, because I saw some posts earlier about this, how Belichick's going to kill it in the spring portal. The spring portal historically has been way worse than the winter portal as far as talent. Has not been nearly as deep and has not been nearly as talented ever since the portal became a thing, ever since the transfer windows, I guess, became a thing. So you're going to be disappointed if you're expecting Belichick to do better than he did in the winter, unless there's just, a guy who just pops out of nowhere and lands into the portal. And that's, I guess, possible. But even that, it still won't, the quantity won't be there. But yeah, so I think you probably want to leave some spots there. How many?
And it also swings both ways, right? The portal swings both ways.
Yeah, and you could potentially lose some guys too. So, I mean, theoretically, North Carolina can add a whole bunch. At certain points, it felt like they were throwing out offers without a care.
Like Oprah.
Like
That's Oprah. What it felt like to me. You got an offer. You got an offer.
They pushed out Laudenslager, and there was a couple other guys who I talked to who mentioned that they had conversations with UNC, and the conversations didn't result in a scholarship offer. So there's been some selectivity to the offering that's gone out. But so yeah.
When you're looking at Inside Carolina Tar Pit Premium message boards, I would assume that everybody in here in the chat's a member of the premium side. You've got Don Callahan's recruiting board for the 2025 class. It is wild to me that you have Bryce Baker committed on June 27th, 2023, and we know he, quote-unquote, recommitted shortly after Belichick became head coach. But then we're all the way down to February the 5th, 2025, and guys are still becoming part of the class, and it's just a lengthy list. To Don's point, the spring portal will open, but guys can leave. And somebody in the chat asked, I believe it was Jack, has anybody spoken about the off-season conditioning program that the players are struggling with? I think it depends on who you talk to, how tough it is. The bottom line, Greg, and this is something people need to understand, is whether it's Belichick or another coach, it's different when you're in a new coaching staff, a new leadership style, however you want to call it. And guys, especially, are coming from one way of doing things to a new way of doing things, whether or not you think it's better or not. Guys make decisions to leave or stay or whatever all the time. I don't think it's unfathomable to see Carolina have some movement out in the spring portal window. It wouldn't be any different than any other school going through the same thing, right?
Given the fact of what we've heard about strength and conditioning being strenuous compared to previous years, you add that in with a very physical, which is what it sounds like we're going to have with spring ball. I mean, very easy to see kids say, you know what, this is just not what I'm interested in, and go somewhere else. I do think we need to kind of put the buffer out there of we talk a lot about the potential of Bill Belichick. But as we've said a lot, Tommy, I mean, this could be a massive success or a massive failure, right? And I think in that we need to be willing to acknowledge that maybe the way that it's been going and the way that it's going to go through spring ball and even to the spring portal actually doesn't prove to be like a good thing.
Yeah.
And doesn't prove to be the right way of doing things. And that's part of the trial and error of this. That's part of the risk. We talk a lot about the reward. You need to talk about the risk. And something, Jason Staples and I have talked about this, but you really need to have like a full season in place. I mean, the whole season with off-season conditioning and spring practice and summer and all those things, in addition to the actual playing season, for Belichick to kind of get a true understanding of what it's going to take, and for everybody around the program to understand what's taking place. And it would not surprise me at all for Belichick to have, a decent amount of success, nothing great. And then this time next year, you see some dramatic changes to how he did things this previous year. I think that's probably the expectation. Not that everything was a home run or not that everything was a failure, but just that, hey, these things worked well. This did not work well at all. So we've got to make changes. And I think that should be the expectation over the next 12 months.
I think adaptability is key here. I understand what worked on one level. You would think it works on this level, but you got to be adaptable to it. And we talk a ton about recruiting. The guys that are already in the house are just as important as the guys that they're bringing to the house. And you got to think about that. And Preston, I'm going to push back. Preston's a regular in here, wouldn't want those soft players anyway. It ain't about being soft. It's about that is too simplified way to look at it. And, we can talk about a guy like Travis Shaw or whoever you want to talk about. It's more to it than just being soft. There are a million things that go into the head of a college athlete that don't necessarily go into the minds of a professional athlete, a grown person with a family. So I wouldn't judge people if they didn't want to be a part of it as being soft. In fact, I'm not calling any of these guys soft to their face. Anyway, my point is it is not as simple as, they're soft, let them go. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and I think, and obviously you guys have talked to different people than I have, but the people I've spoken to, it's actually, some of them have mentioned the workout stuff, but I've heard more of the lack of communication, the lack of understanding of what's going on, the coldness is what is frustrating the people that I've talked to and would be more likely to lead them to enter the transfer portal in the spring. Not, people have mentioned that the, the workouts have been hard, but I heard exactly the same thing when Fedora came in. Everyone was complaining about, because they had to move from a pro offense to a which is normal now, but a no huddle offense with Fedora. So they really focused on that, on, being conditioned and all that. And so I heard a lot of that then too, but now it's more of like, people being like, hey, I would love to learn more about the playbook and learn about this, or what are we doing? When is practice? When is this? And not getting those sort of answers, and you feel a little bit kind of lost. And then you're not feeling, the family feel that you felt with Mac Brown. God, I forgot his name. And his coaching
Well, I
staff.
mean, it's a completely different way of approaching it. And look, don't forget, people need to remember when Mac Brown came in 1988, 87, 88, a shit ton of people left.
Yeah.
Because, and that's bad language, I'm sorry, but they left because of how difficult strength and conditioning and all that stuff was when Mac came in, because Mac wanted to weed out the guys that didn't really want to be there. And we see what it turned out in the first couple of years. But you build towards that. And that's what all new coaching staffs do. So you've got those situations going on. I think we'll see it settle down and maybe get some more communication inside the building and all that as we go after this recruiting cycle. But anyway, Don, are you on Madrid's?
Oh crap. Is he on? I kind of forgot about it. So we're going on my phone, right?
I'm looking at his page. I don't see anything.
Yeah. I have to log in to see anything, so I'm not going to log in on this computer because I don't know my login, to be honest with you.
Tommy.
But yeah, so Greg, to that point, I mean, a lot of people currently talk about Dion and the Colorado experiment, but it's not unlike any other school with turnover and all that. Your thoughts on how you can really remake a roster and how much you need to keep continuity within that roster in college, especially college football these days, if that question makes sense. You can't just bring in 85 new guys. You don't have any chemistry. You don't have any kind of stuff like that. How does this work for you when you're thinking about it?
So it's a good question. And I don't know that I have a full understanding of that process. And the reason I say that is, clearly, if you recruit a lot of high-end dudes and you can pull from the portal just a handful of players to fill in some gaps, which is what Bama and Georgia and Texas and Ohio State, that's what they do. Well, that's the way you want to do it. And while Colorado has had, a little bit of success clearing house and having some good players, although bringing in, Deion Sun as quarterback goes a long way. And of course, Travis Hunter as well. That's at a P4 level, and we haven't seen quite so much of that. But where you do see it is at the lower levels. James Madison's a good example. They brought in like 65 new players in the portal. And the reason they did is because when Cignetti left, everybody left as well. And so it wasn't like the coach's decision when Chesney came in. He was just kind of cleaning up the pieces. And he did a really good job with the guys that he put together in terms of getting them to buy in. And Charlotte is another example. I think they had 70 that left, and then they brought in like 50 or so from the portal. I mean, crazy numbers. And of course, Charlotte was not any good whatsoever. So there's varying degrees of this. And the fact that Colorado is really about the only high-level team program to have had some success. Everybody kind of forgets Bill Snyder at Kansas State. He restocked his squads with JUCOs every year and had huge numbers, dozens and dozens. So you can do it. It's just not the preferred way. And I don't know that that's the preferred way for Bill Belichick, although he's used to free agency, so we'll have to see exactly how that transpires. But clearly in the first year or two or even 3, that's probably going to be a method that he has to utilize.
What you see, Don? Any news on Madrid Tucker?
Nothing on his Instagram page yet. So, yeah, this I don't imagine he's going to text me. The agreement when I spoke to him yesterday, he mentioned that he was doing it on Instagram Live, and so
we're trying to get Don Callahan to show us how the sausage is made.
I know. So as someone who's covered many of these, sometimes you get in and they're like, boom, you're done. And then sometimes it takes forever for them to set up. And 2:00 is really 2:30. So hopefully that's not the case here.
You remind me of when we were in college, when we were going to Cat's Cradle, we heard I've told this story on the podcast before. We heard REM was coming like the REM was coming to the Cat's Cradle, but they were going to perform under the name Flight of Mavis. So Flight of Mavis at the Cat's Cradle, and it was packed. Everybody bought tickets. It was probably the most tickets. People were cramming their ways into the door, and we're packed in there. Fire code violations without question. And who comes out on stage? Flight of Mavis. And they didn't know what the heck we were talking about. REM this, REM that. This is Don Callahan talking about.
But REM did do that quite a bit in Athens, which is where a lot of those rumors kind of came from back in the late 80s and 90s.
And so, did see Nirvana in Cat's Cradle and Public Enemy and Digital Underground, bands like that, and a lot of others, but no REM. So no Madrid Tucker yet from Don Callahan.
I think when people kind of venture into the recruiting beat, especially if they've been doing, the college football beat or whatever, they're amazed at just what's the word I'm looking for? Just how things just happen unexpectedly and things never go according to plan. And if you cover college football game and then you go to a high school football game, massive different experience. You're not getting your buffet for sure. But although I've been places that serve me food, like Kannapolis will give you food.
What do you get at a high school football game? Some chicken tenders and fries?
I think it was just, they gave me like, I think it was just like hot dogs, that sort of thing, but yeah.
Tommy, I hopped on West Virginia's message board just because that's a finalist for Tucker. And I think this just speaks to fan bases in general. And I love this so much, but the top thread right now is more proof that ESPN hates us. Great.
Every fan base is the exact same.
ESPN does not hate West Virginia. They don't even know where West Virginia is. So.
I mean, you look at some of the threads on, everybody hates everybody, and all the refs are against us.
So someone brought up Shrine Bowl. So I haven't. It's been a long time since I covered a Shrine Bowl, but the week is awesome. They're great to you. They allow you tremendous access to the players there, and they have a little station that's set up in the hotel where the players stay at, where if you have questions throughout the day, you can go there and ask whoever, and it's awesome. But the actual game, the last couple of times they had me sitting in the stands with the fans, which is, I'm not trying to say I'm above that, but when you have a laptop, you have a bunch of gear that, and cameras that you can't leave there just to go get food and all this sort of stuff. And then they use the one level, because they had an actual press box level, but it couldn't accommodate all the media. And then they had another level where it was all the Shriners were allowed to go into. And that may be where 77 Music Nut is talking about. They seem to have like a pretty good spread and were pretty comfortable that floor for the Shriners, but not from my experience for the actual game. But one of the things, unless you guys had anything to add on that front.
Well, I've got a question I want to ask, but
okay, go ahead.
No, it's a recruiting question. So if you've got any more fun stuff.
Well, I was going to remind you, since we're waiting.
And how long do you have, Greg? Are you with us? Are you rolling with us, Greg? You're not going anywhere?
I am eventually. How long are we talking here?
Well, just 3 hours.
I don't know. I didn't know if you. If we're on here for 3 hours, I'm glad I got my Starbucks.
I got a few more minutes.
Go ahead, Don. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Well, I was going to remind you about the question that we saw on the message board about the in-state recruiting.
Yes, BJ Davis. I don't know if this is the same one, but I'm going to call this up because I think this is relevant, and I don't know what he's.
Okay, there was an actual question on the message board, and I said I was going to bring it up, but that, I mean, if it's basically the same idea, so we just roll with BJ Davis.
Yeah, BJ responding to somebody says, we got a lot of BJs in the chat too.
Now.
I didn't make that comment. I just said the name. North Carolina still needs to be a priority. We, as in North Carolina, needs to lock up the state first and foremost and expand out from there. Depending on grabbing kids from California every year isn't sustainable. I want both your comments on that, and I'll tell you why being North Carolina central-based recruiting is important, I think. Because I think in the transfer portal era, when guys are so far from home, wherever that may be, if things go south, they're more tempted to leave. And I also think local kids will play for a NIL discount for their flagship or their in-state schools as well. We saw it with Hampton. We saw it with Drake May. Greg, your comments on in-state recruiting, and then Don can get in here after he's had time to marinate.
Well, look, I think the great example is Roy Williams, right? Because when Roy Williams was at Kansas in the middle of the country, he could recruit the entire country. And he had a lot of really good players from California. So when he came to North Carolina 22 years ago, he signed a number of kids from California, the Ware twins, Alex Stevenson, Larry Drew. He went after, I guess Jalen Brown was a California kid who they missed out on. All those kids transferred out. And I guess Dion was another one, but Dion stayed. But what Roy Williams realized, to your point, is that, yeah, you can get them to come, but homesickness is a real thing. And if the environment's not perfect, they're going to get that itch to kind of go back closer to home. And so he quit recruiting California kids for the most part. And if you're talking about a Hall of Fame coach, one of the best to ever do it is having those types of problems. And, Carolina is a national recruiter anyway on the basketball side of things. So when you switch gears over to football, Mack Brown, his first time in Chapel Hill was very North Carolina centric, and of course went up into the Tidewater. When he came back the second time, he wasn't as much about dominating in state as he was dominating the footprint. And that footprint was Virginia and North Carolina and South Carolina and down into Georgia and maybe even down to Florida a little bit. So regional, but not necessarily in state quite as much. For the same reasons. And he talked about that. If you've got kids where their families can come and watch them, that sticks. That's some glue, even if maybe they're not playing as much as they would like to. And I think that's just a crucial component of it. It's interesting to see, but there just are not many programs that can recruit nationally. Notre Dame obviously does it, but there's not many others. Even Alabama and Georgia, they're very local in how they recruit.
Don, your take here.
No, I agree. Notre Dame is the only true example I could think of that recruits nationally, and doesn't have like a base in state, mostly because Indiana doesn't have great football. And so, but Georgia, which does recruit nationally, but a good chunk of their classes are always the Peach State. Same thing with Alabama. The one kind of example, Clemson, and some of that is because South Carolina is a weird state to where I guess annually is top heavy, but not very deep. So you can't just rely just purely on South Carolina talent. You have to kind of venture out. But yeah, I think, I'll take it in a different direction. I think that, with Mack Brown, and I think I'll push back a little bit on Greg. I don't think he's incorrect. I mean, he was definitely correct. Mack kind of focused on the 6-hour driving distance, the radius that he focused on. Early on, he focused in-state because we had like a historical class, in-state class in the 2021 class. But after that, the talent just really, really dropped in the state. Now it's picking up, and the 2026 class is actually going to be a really good class. But so I think that kind of forced him to go out of state a little bit more. And then also you have the NIL, and so he started kind of focusing on different types of kids a little bit. But anyway, going back to the original question, there is some momentum that can be had. Now, kids are not going to, if you land one kid, that doesn't mean you're going to get his best friend or his teammate. That's not a guarantee, but it helps. And what we saw in the 21 class, remember the 4-star Armageddon everybody loved, everyone was super excited for?
The TikTok video of the Virginia guys.
Yeah, well, that was in the 2022 class, I believe. But yeah, I mean, you can build that sort of momentum and you can play off of it. And when you have these recruiting events, and what ended up happening is they would have these recruiting events where it's much easier to get in-state guys to visit your campus much more frequently than it is for a kid from New Jersey. It just is, from a logistics standpoint and from a financial standpoint. I know a lot of the kids that he's messing with in New Jersey have money, so financially, it doesn't matter as much to them, but logistically, it is a factor. Whereas if you're in Charlotte, you can easily make the trip up to Chapel Hill a few times a year in the off season. And if you're seeing the same guys and they're talking to each other, or they're on the same 7-on-7 team. That was the other part. It was that North Carolina recruited a lot. They didn't recruit the Carolina Stars particularly, but they recruited a lot of guys at the 7-on-7 program. And when those guys are traveling, if you're traveling with a kid who's committed to North Carolina and he's your roommate for the weekend, that makes an impact. And so I do think that those sort of things do help. And I also think that while, nowadays you don't have to rely so much on the high school coach as you would have 15, 20 years ago. But if you're in a good spot with that high school coach, that definitely helps. And it helps with, let's say you need to get a kid to campus in 2 weeks. Maybe the high school coach can't take them, but he knows an assistant coach who would love to go to Chapel Hill, and he can set you up with him. If you don't have that relationship with that high school coach because you haven't been by that school, then it's harder for you to be like, hey, can you help me out here, and have that guy actually help you out. So I think there's a lot of things in addition to, and I 100% agree with what Greg was talking about the homesickness, and what Tommy was talking about, which is a great point, is, yeah, you take a kid from LA and he comes to North Carolina, if he even comes to North Carolina, and let's say he absolutely blows up and is this, whatever, like a cornerback who is projected to go in the top 2 rounds of the draft in the next draft. Well, Southern Cal is like, wow, we need to improve our secondary. So, I mean, it's easy sell, or even not even Southern Cal. It could be anyone. Just throw a bunch of money that, North Carolina can't compete with. And while Belichick certainly is being well funded by the university, he really, if you look at what he's done, he's not getting into bidding wars, even in the transfer portal. I mean, he's taking guys, as Greg kind of mentioned, the value stuff. So, yeah, I think taking care of your home state is important. And thus far, there hasn't been any evidence of that. Obviously, they can come out in spring recruiting and completely change that and make it more of a priority. Oh, looks like Tucker is on now live. I don't know how do you guys? All right, so they're talking about him now. How do you want to do this, Tommy?
Well, you get to the point where he's talking about what he's about to do,
Okay.
and then you can hold it up to the screen, because I can't get it to. I'm not as. Can you share your screen?
I'm not logged in, so I can't.
There you go. Look, he looks very happy on his. Look, this is real live radio YouTube stuff, people.
I'll put it up once he actually, because right now they're talking about him, and he's laughing about the compliments, I guess. Well, he's a great kid, by the way. I've had a few conversations with him the past few weeks, and great kid.
To protect the nameless, Don, have you ever dealt with kids that weren't great kids?
Yeah.
We will not name those. That'll be when we get back to having a bash or something.
The unfortunate thing is because of North Carolina, through the years they've had to recruit. Just the nature of the type of kid that they recruit ends up being quality kids, so I don't have to worry about it too much. But every once in a while, yeah, you get a turd, so you got to deal with the turd.
So somebody in the chat, I think our top 5, we're going to do, and we'll probably do it sooner than later, but top 5 historical recruits for North Carolina. Greg, can you do that? We'll do this.
Yeah, probably.
Top 5 influential recruit commitment signings for North Carolina football. It doesn't have to be successful on the field. We'll put it that way. We'll just say influential recruits.
Well, clearly, like Marvin's at the.
I was going to say
top of the list, right?
100%. That is the number one guy.
Drake and Sam, granted these are the last 20 years, but
But yeah, so we'll do that. So top 5 influential recruits, however you want to take that.
So are we doing that for this? Did yours freeze?
Yeah,
Greg?
I'm getting the circle.
It came back, I think.
They're talking about him, and he's got his phone just looking at it, which is funny.
I know.
High school kids, man, you have to pry a phone out of a high school kid's cold hands.
The worst is when I'm like, I set it all up with the kid. I'm like, all right, I'm going to stream it. It's going to be really cool. Here's the link and all this. And then they pull out their phone and they stream. I'm like, you're cutting into, because then they always they're like, oh, how many people are following? How many people are watching? How many people are watching? I'm like, well, you're kind of eating into it, you know?
So Don.
So it seems like they're talking about multiple kids. That's probably the problem here.
Yeah, the coach is walking behind them, highlighting each of them.
Gotcha.
So Don, what has surprised you out of this recruiting class the last few weeks here with all the high school commitments? Has there been any like real shockers or anything like that?
There's been a lot of shocking of me. There's the Nico Maggio who commits while in the airport of the Atlanta airport, and on his way to his official visit to North Carolina. It's just like, okay, I get it. You like North Carolina. Why not wait until the official visit to commit and announce your commitment? But so that was kind of surprising to me. Yeah. So, and there's a couple others, just the amount, it's been a little bit of drinking of a fire hose. We get a tip on a kid, and as I'm preparing, he's committing. A lot of fast-paced stuff going on with decisions being made very, very quickly. So there's been a whole lot of aspects of it that's been very, very surprising to me.
Obviously, Amon Hawkins, his inclusion with the staff has made inroads in California, and we've seen that. But what about the IMG guy? What about other assistants that have been added? Do you see their influence in this? You got many Florida. Well, you got three Florida kids, not IMG kids, but 3 Florida kids. Any influences that you're seeing so far?
Yeah.
Or is this all Belichick thing?
So the interesting thing, and I'd like to get Greg's thoughts on this too, is, and we mentioned this, I think in a scoop, is that one of the potential recruiting attacks, Belichick has kind of in his plans, and we haven't gotten clarity if this is exactly, which is kind of what we've heard and what we've kind of observed really, is that the quote unquote 10 assistant coaches will actually be recruiters, while the actual coaches will technically be analysts, meaning a guy like Andrew Blaylock will be under NCAA rules, a quote unquote assistant coach. So that allows him to go on the road and recruit. Now, on the practice field, he's not going to coach. That will be left up to the analysts to actually coach. And then what that does is you have guys who are just purely recruiters. And it's been kind of interesting to kind of follow that. Corey Giddens obviously is another guy who they've done that with. But then there's been other guys like Freddie Kitchens has been on the road, and from our understanding, he's going to be the offensive coordinator. So clearly there's some double duty pulling stuff there. Greg, any thoughts, anything you can add to that?
No, unfortunately not. I was trying to figure out exactly what the rule is based on who could, if there's a requirement that the guys actually coaching on the field have to be the one who are actually doing the recruiting, which is how it's always kind of been assumed. But I would have to dive into the bylaws to see exactly what that is, which I'm kind of looking now. But at the moment, no, I don't. I don't know.
So
I have an answer.
What would happen, and this is before the analysts were allowed to coach, is that, like Greg said, your assistant coaches will go on the road, and if you would lose an assistant coach, here we go. Nope, never mind. False alarm. And so what would happen is, let's say you would lose your receivers coach, you would deputize someone on the staff to fill in his position on the road and kind of go out on the road. And so usually during coaching transitions, you would see a lot of people who typically have never been on the road before now all of a sudden go into a bunch of high schools. What kind of allowed this to be possible is the rule that passed last year where analysts could coach. And so now you don't have to kind of designate them as assistant coaches anymore to coach your team. So that's been a little bit interesting. I think we're getting closer here.
By the way, Ben posted on the thread that Laudenslager committed to Rhode Island.
Yeah, that's a good spot
So
for him.
he has found a home. Looking through questions, I only got a couple people that have responded with top 5 influential recruits for North Carolina football. Let's talk about this while we're waiting on Madrid Tucker. Looking to fly over to the U.S. in autumn. What? I want to say it with an accent because if you're overseas, you probably got a cool accent. But what UNC game would you recommend trying to attend? We'll fold that in, Don, to a recruiting weekend question as well. Given Carolina's schedule this year, looks like maybe the Clemson game is going to be a huge.
That's what popped in my mind immediately. Greg, any thought?
I think that's the main one.
Yeah.
I mean, the season opener, of course, but.
Yeah, would TCU be a big recruit weekend, Don, do you think? Especially since it's a Monday night.
The opener always is a big weekend, so yeah. But I mean, if you're, as a fan, want to see a good football game, I mean, it's so hard. Who knows what North Carolina is going to look like? I mean, Clemson seems like they're going to be
Is Clemson going to be loaded?
What's that? Yeah.
They're going to be good.
So if North Carolina is not on that level, that might not be a good game to go to.
I think Stanford game would be a cool game in Kenan Stadium, November 8th.
Here goes Madrid Tucker. Do we want to? Can you hear this or no?
So first and foremost, I would like to give praise to the man above for giving me the ability to wake up every morning and take a step forward towards my goals every day, putting me through the hard times and the good times, the trials and tribulations. It made me into the man I am today. I'd like to give a special thanks to my mom, my dad, my sister, and my brother. I love you guys. They pushed me to the limits I never knew I could get to. I knew coming into the life that I would have a big shoe to fill. With them encouraging me and pushing me made it easier for everyone. I'd like to thank my coaches, starting with my coaches. Coach Travis, I know you're not here, but you definitely gave me the spark in my life that I needed. Coach Sam and the Fort Myers football staff, including the baseball staff, were always supporting me and pushing me and believing in me. Without all my coaches, I wouldn't be where I am now. As my mom always says, it takes a village. I appreciate you all. I'd like to thank Coach Chrome, who took on my baseball team and still remains supportive and helping me push forward through a difficult career. I'm still here playing baseball, by the way. And this is off script. I would also like to give a special shout out to GBG. If you know, you know. Love y'all. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to Frank Lennon, his dad. There's one person that couldn't make it. He's up with his mom right now, but I would also call him my brother, Frank. I love you, bro. I wish you was here. I know you couldn't make it, but keep doing big things, and I love you. But with that being said, I'll be taking my talents, football and baseball, to the University of North Carolina.
All right. So to give a play-by-play, I am sending out the tweet. I am going to activate the story. Make sure that the date is correct. Hopefully.
Yeah, he's got the baseball swag too.
And I am now sending out the text.
Let's see how long it takes to get the text.
And I posted on the free board. Let me go. Oh, I just got my text.
Boom. Commitment alert. Dynamic Florida receiver Madrid Tucker selects UNC. It's pretty quick turnaround.
And one more thing is the database. Make sure sometimes someone beat me to this stuff. All right, so I think everything is done. So
Caleb in the chat says, hope he doesn't Jordan Adams us. If he can make a lot of money playing baseball, then
I don't think
yeah.
he's on the level as Jordan Adams.
Yeah, Jordan Adams was definitely a different level. And other people asked about before about Caleb Koss. Caleb Koss is football. We'll see how that goes. He is not on the baseball roster this year. New coaching staff, starting defensive back. He needs to be on the football side.
And that's usually what happens. They give it a try for the first couple of years and kind of see what happens.
I think his potential in baseball is higher than in football, but that's my non-educated opinion.
Interesting.
But you can't pass up the opportunity to at least try the football, to go all in on the football side, I think, if you're a guy like that. Greg, give me your top 5 influential recruits.
Oh, you wanted me to do that for now?
Well, you said you're going to leave us soon, so.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize we were doing that today. Well, Marvin for sure is one of them. I mean, you could even sneak Greg Little in because he was a local kid, that same recruiting class. But clearly Sam Howell when Matt came back, and then Drake flipping from Bama. Those were big ones. Trying to think, like Puff Thomas, that crowd. Back in 2003, I believe that was a big group because that kind of suggested that Bunning had a chance, and everybody was kind of excited after what had happened. And then Ronald Curry is an obvious one because he was, I guess, probably the best player in the country at the time when he recruited out of Virginia or signed out of Virginia.
In both sports.
Both sports.
And watching him, that's one thing about Curry. Curry obviously got hurt. I know the parents of the Georgia Tech guy that tackled him and tore his Achilles in that game. But Ronald Curry playing basketball, Greg, I don't know if you ever went over to like the Holiday Festival or whatever it was called back then. It was in Reynolds Coliseum. Ronald Curry was a stud in basketball. And then, it just completely changed when he got, in football and all that stuff at Carolina because you changed the game or you changed your body so much. But anyway, I think Ronald Curry, because he was committed to Virginia and then he flipped to Carolina. A lot of people still talk about the Curry curse, though.
Yeah,
but anyway.
Sure. And that's just that's the last, 28 years? So
yeah. I mean, if we're going to go way back, we could do that, but let's keep it into 2000s, the late 90s, 2000s. Who you got, Don?
Yes, I'm definitely going to keep it in during the internet era. And so I agree with Greg, Marvin, just because that was kind of the start of the Butch Davis stuff with recruiting and all that in a positive way. I know it didn't end positively.
What was in the briefcase?
Yeah. I put Sam Howell number 2 for me. I remember Gavin Blackwell, who kind of said that Sam Howell made it cool to go to North Carolina again. And I think that a lot of guys after that class ended up going to North Carolina because Sam Howell signed, and then the success Sam Howell had on the football field immediately. And in the same sort of vein, Drake May, he was in the middle of that 4-star Mageddon. And I remember Kobe Paysour saying that he told a coach, was it Thigpen or was it Galloway? I can't remember which one. They were kind of joking around, and he was like, "Look, I think Kobe had a question about just the quarterback situation, and he was like, "Look, we're about to get Drake May," and he said, well, "You get Drake May, and I'm going to commit the next day," kind of almost like a joke, but that's the way it kind of happened, and for a lot of obvious reasons. I mean, when you flip from Alabama to North Carolina, that's kind of the same thing as making North Carolina cool again for the in-state guys. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with in-state guys. You can do that with in-state guys. You landed a top player from New Jersey. I don't know if that's going to really kind of turn into a domino effect there because it's just too far away, and there's other schools, powerful schools are recruiting that state also. And then also 2 names that Greg did mention, Michael Carter, him and Drake Lawler, I remember in their class, almost made it a competition to kind of recruit for that class and really made it made it a lot of fun. He's also like, and I know you guys dealt with him, unbelievable kid to deal with, awesome kid to talk to. You know, and then obviously had a great career at North Carolina, went into the NFL and kind of helped with, I guess, raising the reputation of the running back at North Carolina. Because I know it was before my time, North Carolina had a great running back reputation, but kind of died out there for a little bit. And then he kind of helped kind of raise it up. And then another guy, which is going to be another in the same sort of vein as Marvin Austin, is Tony Grimes. You know, this was at the time a massive recruiting win for North Carolina. And then the following year, the following class, I think, where all of those, you know, George Pettaway and Zach Rice, the TikTok video that we talked about earlier, all those guys might not have been interested in North Carolina if not for watching one of the top players in their area end up at North Carolina. And I mean, really, if we're being honest, I mean, Grimes played a lot when he was at North Carolina, but things didn't end well. And I mean, he's still playing. So, and he was on that UNLV team, right? Yeah, that defense was actually pretty good. And now he transferred to Purdue? Is that right?
I think so. Yeah. I can't keep up with it, man. When you
Yeah, I
go
know.
4
It's
for
hard.
4, it's tough.
Yeah.
Let me show you something I think is funny. 2 things, and this is I play too much video games, but Gavin Blackwell is always a threat to transfer on the video game.
Is he really?
Yeah, so I had to load him up and get him off that train. But also, I'm in 2026. I want to show people who my first team All-Americans are. Look at the 2 highlighted names.
I don't know if I can see that.
Zach Rice and Travis Shaw, first team All-Americans.
They are
perspective.
They are like the stereotypical great video game players, but not on the field.
So
all the physical attributes you can imagine, but
all right. So Tommy, 2 things, and I'm gonna duck out. Number 1, they are a good reminder, and granted, they still have time. But a good reminder that only like half of 5-stars get drafted. So even though 5-stars seem like they're can't miss, evaluation is very difficult. And then there's so much that has to go right. There has to be the want to, you have to be injury free. You have to have a good fit with your coaching staff and the strength and conditioning coaches. There's a lot of things that have to go right. And if you're a 5-star, you have much better odds, but you're not guaranteed. The other thing, Don mentioned Carter and Jake Lawler kind of rallying the troops. Who was the group out of Dudley back in what, 02, 03? That was Martell Thatch.
Yeah, Thatch, Jamal Edwards.
Oh, Edwards.
Yes.
That summer, the whole thing was that they were going to rally the troops, right, and get everybody to come to Carolina, and only one of them did. Well, no, I guess 2 of them did. I guess DeMario is the one that went to state.
Yeah.
So. There was some interesting times. A lot of pretty awesome names in
that. Didn't Edwards go? Edwards went to Florida State, right?
He did.
Mario Edwards.
So Thatch came. I was thinking Edwards.
Carolina.
Did he come back? No, maybe he stayed down there.
So I don't know. There's a lot of names from those years.
Yeah, and that's a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
It's actually not that long ago, but it feels like it was a really long time ago. Greg, if you're going to dip,
Presley's like 40 now, isn't he?
Probably.
Seriously, I think he's 40.
That is
Tony Baker's like 38. I mean,
that's nuts. That is nuts. But that also tells you just, I mean, I'm not that much older than them.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you were just a kid covering.
I was in college.
Younger kids
at that time. Yeah.
Well, I was looking at some questions before you get out of here, Don, and I want to throw up people's things. Let me add, to your point, Greg. You've covered a lot of it, and Don, you can get in on this answer. 5 stars. So I think for you to make the NFL, we'll call it the NFL, be an elite player, you got to have talent, you got to have drive, you got to have development, you got to have all the intangibles. I often say when you're around athletes that are elite, they're different. It just feels different to be around them. So what's the most important thing besides God-given talent, Greg? Is it coaching? Is it development? I mean, I know it goes all together, but what is the most important thing besides God-given talent for guys to reach the NFL, be elite?
It's a good question, Tommy. I don't know that there's one thing. I mean, from my perspective, with just life in general, the people who have the drive and the determination and the grit. I think Angela Duckworth, if you've read that book, if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. But just the unwillingness to settle, I think has got to be up there. But I also don't want to say that, certain guys who are 5 stars who haven't been All-Americans lack that, because that's not fair to them, because there are so many different pieces of the puzzle that have to come together for all that to work. But I think if you have an immense amount of talent and you've got that just simmering desire to be the best in all things that you do, you're in a really good position to have success. But you still need some of those other things to kind of help you and to lift you up.
Yeah. And Don, your part of the question is covering recruiting. When you cover these guys and you see them and you deal with them, who sticks out as can you tell this guy's going to be really good, or have you thought somebody's going to be that way and they never were?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a bunch of guys who I was like, this guy is for sure, a top NFL draft pick and never materialized. But I mean, I think, you learn that size and athleticism really, I mean, you have that, you're going to get drafted, as long as you just don't completely just mess it up, you're going to get drafted. But I do agree with Greg with the grit, the word I was going to use it, or the phrase, you got to love the game, meaning you got to basically wake up and be like, I love it so much. I want to go run so I'm in shape. I want to go lift. I want to do these things because I just love it so much. And that's grit, what Greg was kind of talking to. And the other element I would say is luck, which I think what Greg's kind of alluding to too. I mean, some people just unlucky situations with injury, with maybe situations with the program you're in and that sort of thing. But I think ultimately, if you have the size and the athleticism, when you look at, like, there's certain guys, like, I know his career at UNC didn't live up to, I guess, maybe expectations, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some people felt like it did. Des Evans, if you see him in person, you're like, oh, that's an NFL player right there. I mean, you see guys and you're like, okay, he's 6'5", blah, 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 blah. And then you go in person, they're like, okay, yeah. But you see Des Evans in person, you're like, wow. I mean, that's how they're built. You see, like, I know I'm talking about a Hall of Famer, but if you've ever met Julius Peppers in person, you're like, whoa.
Yep.
I mean, there is a difference. Oh, the mute button got you. The mute button got you, Tommy.
Keep chopping wood, Tommy.
It was good because I was fanboying over Peppers. I mean, it's the only person that I've seen and I've covered that was just like, this is not a real human being.
Yeah.
To be able to do the thing he does, to be able to be that way. I said he'd be an an NBA player, and I'll never forget his first basketball game. I think his first shot hit the shot clock in Charlotte, and people said, Tommy's an idiot. That became 12-0 Tommy. But way back then, I said, this dude is different. And, Peppers would probably be close to my top apex of all-time unbelievable athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And even he wasn't a guarantee. He had to have coaching, he had to have the drive and all the stuff you wanted to, and he just, like I say, they're different. Anyway.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to show some of these people's choices in the chat, and Greg, if you need to dip, let me know.
All right.
We'll see you.
I see
folks.
Greg.
Yep.
That is
OG
guys. Greg Barnes. Appreciate it, Greg. Hour and 45 minutes worth. Don will send you a check.
Greg owes me dinner.
I do. We have to do that soon. So that my interest on dinners.
Every time I'm like, hey, Greg, let's hang out. I'm like, no, Don, I have other friends.
Well, let's go to the big city over there.
I wish that was the case. I wish that was the case. I mean, Don's only like half a mile from me.
I know. He could walk to my house, but nothing. Yeah.
All right, guys. Enjoyed it.
I see it, Greg.
Yeah, appreciate it, Greg. All right, Don, let's start easing this one into port here. Let me go through a couple of these people in the chat. BJ Davis said Ronald Curry, Marvin Austin, Sam Howell, Drake May, Mike Thomas. Mike Thomas is another one in high school, man. Richmond County would in the playoffs. We'd go see them play Garner. That Richmond County crowd was ridiculous.
Still are.
Do what?
They
Still are.
Yeah.
They Richmond County back in the day, though, with Mike Thomas and all, that.
Oh,
if they're as good as
I'm talking about their fans, but you're talking about the crowd.
I'm talking about the talent they put on the field.
Talent,
Yeah,
gotcha.
the fans were nuts too.
Yeah.
Now they got all the lights and everything down there. Top 5: Slee Rat, Ronald Curry, Drake May, Sam Howell, Marvin Austin, Greg Little, and of course we mean Marvin Austin and Greg Little as interesting recruits. Jim Holland's going way back. Lawrence Taylor, Peppers, Howell, May, and Dre Bly. I don't remember Lawrence Taylor being a big time recruit. I mean, at the time.
How old were you when he was being recruited?
Like 9? No, 6 or 7. I don't remember him being a big time recruit. Maybe because I was, I was playing with toys and stuff.
I only remember Lawrence Taylor as a New York Giant. So,
well, you're missing out. The 30 for 30 or Football Life, Lawrence Taylor's pretty good. I saw it on one of the streaming services. Ronald Curry was an enormous recruit on 2 fronts, definitely. Sean Crawley, Taylor, Peppers, May, Howell, Harris Barton, and some love. You know who Harris Barton is? One of Carolina's best offensive linemen ever. Cy says Drake, Sam, Marvin Austin, Mark May, Ronald Curry. Mark May is directly responsible for an awful lot of good athletes at North Carolina.
That's true. When you put it that way, that's very true.
Him and his lovely bride have produced a lot of talent across the way. Florida National Championship in baseball, and of course the May brothers. That's the Richmond County pipeline we talked about. Anyway, a lot of good chats in here. Scott Dawson says something about North Carolina switching to 8A instead of 4A. It's been that, hasn't it? It's been 4A.
No, they were
AA.
Yeah, they had this split. They split the classes, but last year it was back down to just 4 classes, and I didn't know that they were splitting them again. I actually enjoyed the 4.
Not having 8 state championships to worry about. All right, anything left that we need to talk about that we haven't really talked about? I'm trying to make sure I hit. Okay, here's a question for you. Here's a question. These recruits are less than blue chip. I guess we're talking about the guys that North Carolina's got committed in the last little bit. Are we, as in North Carolina, going to be able to compete with these guys? Don, this boils down to evaluation, coaching, talent, of course, but also you got in the game late, so you got to get who you can get. But your thoughts here on this class overall for what North Carolina and for Bill Belichick needed to accomplish?
So I think that if we keep in mind that this is pushing North Carolina over the 85 scholarship limit and closer to the 105. And so traditionally, some of these guys that were at it, those spots would have gone to a walk-on. Then obviously it's huge success for North Carolina. There's just not a whole lot of talent in the high school ranks after the first signing period. But when I look at what Belichick has brought in so far, including the transfer portal, I mean, to be honest, and we talked about this a little bit with Jason, and I would love to have the conversation again and maybe even go even more in depth with Jason, but there's not a whole lot of difference makers, like clear difference makers. Could there be
known before they step on campus?
Yeah, like could Newkirk turn into a difference maker? Could Tyler Hauser turn into a difference maker? Absolutely, but there's no. I don't see like a Omarion Hampton or a Drake May or anything like that. And really, I'm really, really curious about this season. I'm so fascinated about just how it's going to look. And this with what they have,
yeah,
because it's going to be really interesting.
It's still a long ways to August. Obviously, Spring practice is coming up. We don't know exactly when spring practice is. Sounds like we're not the only ones, but we will certainly cover it. Don, overall on this class, like you said, no difference makers or whatever, but did you get a sense with all these recent commitments that there's a certain, I don't want to call it a certain niche that Belichick is mining and the staff is mining, but was there a common theme throughout these players, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, maybe not throughout the players, but I noticed that there was definitely a surprising focus on slot receivers, on defensive linemen, and on running backs and on linebackers, and specifically like the Mike sort of linebackers, the inside sort the old school Mike linebackers, and I know that's a lot, but it's just interesting when you look at the amount of players that they focused on and just how many of them fit into one of those categories. And clearly those are areas that they felt like they needed to get some bodies at to kind of build up some competition and potentially find some diamonds in the rough at those areas.
Yeah. So it is a lot of names. Of course, if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber, go to the Tar Pit Premium message board, click on UNC Football Recruiting Board. It is, I think it's remains the bottom pinned. Am I saying that? Am I telling people the right thing? If you want to see, yes, it is the bottom pinned article or thread. Don's been updating it. Wow. Your initial post on it was July 20th, 2019. And it is pretty incredible, but it has got everybody listed, and you can click on them and learn all about the recruits. These, of course, these fall signees, or excuse me, these February signees, high school guys will not be on campus until the summer, but everybody else, or most everybody else, will be on campus or is already on campus. Anything left on? We're going to get out of here just short of 2 hours. There's been 400 upper 400s in here the entire time. Now we've lost a few of them. When we lost Greg, he took his harem and his fan group with him. Melinda Dolphin, you're welcome. I would do Carolina women's basketball interviews every day if we could get those. So, we'd love to have those players come on and do shows with Jeremiah and myself. I'll do it all the time. If they're available, we're available to make it happen. So, but Don, anything left on a recruiting tip? Will you get a break at this point, or does it keep right on cooking?
I do have content for this week, and then obviously we're going to hit on the 26th class. I'm hoping it slows down just a little bit in February. It is dead period. We are in the middle of the dead period, and that expands all the way into the end of February, I believe. But I am, as I said, heading to Philadelphia tomorrow. And I know this was a long time ago for you, Tommy, but traveling with kids, particularly a baby, and it might just be me, Katie, and the baby, to be honest, ends up being quite the ends up not being a break. Although I do hope to I do plan on enjoying the Flyers game on Saturday and enjoying the Super Bowl on Sunday. What about you?
Kind of sad you're not going to be around for the Super Bowl. I mean, we've done that at the Man Tower before, so I guess we'll have to find something different to do.
Did you come to the Man Tower one?
I came one time. Yeah, okay. At least once. It may have been twice, but
it's been a while because my one neighbor here has been holding them lately. And after you hold a few of them, you're kind of like, oh, someone else wants to host? Okay, that's cool.
By all means, yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
It'd be nice if the weather's nice. You could do something outside, but you guys will have a blast. Have safe travels up north. I'm not going above the Mason-Dixon line. I do not like the north.
Oh, we got to bring you up to Philadelphia.
Well, I'll go with people that know the area, can take me to the non-touristy spots, but I'm not a big fan of cold weather, so
it's going to be absolutely. It's going to be absolutely nuts. Just trying to find a place to watch the Super Bowl. The places that are sold out, the prices to get into some of these places, it's absolutely nuts. So fortunately, we have some plan. We do have some options here that we're going to pursue, but and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm not, as I've said, not an Eagles fan, but I'm going to enjoy.
So go Chiefs! Fans. Say it, go Chiefs!
I know. I'm not. And then watch one of the. That's not what you want to be in a bar with a bunch of Eagles fans and them thinking you're a Chiefs fan. That's
really, don't put that on me. You can call me a lot of things. Just don't call me that.
Yeah.
Well, have safe travels. Sean Crowley telling you the weather. it's going to be cold in the north. So safe travels. That's Don Callahan. I'm Tommy Ashley. Shout out to Greg Barnes for joining us for nearly the whole 2 hours. And shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. They're, of course, sponsors of the show. Most importantly, shout out to the hundreds of folks that have joined us throughout the day. It's been a noon dish, special signing day dish, completing the UNC 2025 class. Tar Pit Premium
Let me
message
answer
boards.
Preston's question real quick.
Where is it? Oh, okay.
What's your favorite Philly cheesesteak? Jim's on South Street. Okay. You go grab your cheesesteak and then walk to the back, go up the stairs, and unless things have changed, go sit up in the top area. And it's just an open area with a bunch of tables. Grab a table near the window. You can look out South Street, watch all the people and all that sort of stuff. That's where you need to go. Forget Pat's and Gino's. It's, go there or go somewhere else where it's a little like it's kind of like when you want good barbecue in North Carolina and everyone has their favorite place, you find the hole in the wall place. That's where you're getting the good barbecue. Same thing when it comes to cheesesteaks. Find the hole in the wall place. Find the place that looks ugly outside but has a bunch of cars in the parking lot. That's where you go.
Absolutely. The hole in walls. Hey, local small businesses. They are the best places to go. Don, we're getting out of here. Everybody stay safe. Everybody stay warm today. It's chilly in North Carolina. It'll be back warm, I think, the rest of the week. Everybody take it easy. Carolina's 2025 signing day class. Get it all on Inside Carolina. Thanks, Don.